Welcome to World Storytelling Cafe. Together we can. We are your hosts, Mary Hayes and myself, Linda Shantz-Carestes. Mary and I are both longtime members of Tales and Storytelling Alberta. We are tellers with the Storytelling Alberta Story Share project and have time slips training to enable us to work on story creation with persons with dementia. Your Zoom host is Doreen Vanderstoep.
Well, Linda, let's start at the beginning with that age-old question. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
What is storytelling anyway? People ask me all the time. Well, it all began around the fire. People gathered to share stories, to enlighten and entertain. And through stories, culture and traditions were passed from generation to generation. Storytelling Alberta has put a contemporary twist on this ancient oral art, and we have existed for more than 40 years. Storytellers deliver all kinds of stories, epics and historical tales, personal stories and family stories, and of course, folk tales and traditional tales. And the stories are told from the heart without reading them. And the stories brought to life with the teller's facial expressions, gestures, and vocal use. The magic of oral storytelling takes part in the interaction between the teller, the tale, and you, the listener.
Storytelling Alberta. Tellers share their tales with audiences of all ages and wherever people gather. We present tell-arounds, story circles where tellers share polished stories or works in progress. First-timers, experienced tellers, and listeners are all welcome. Story cafes. These are performance storytelling based on a theme, featuring guest storytellers. Workshops offered by Storytelling Alberta to help participants develop storytelling skills. And retreats, a weekend of workshops to learn and experience storytelling skills. This year, on September 22nd to 24th, 2023, at Sylvan Lake, Alberta. You should look for more information on our website for this event.
Thanks, Linda. And tonight we present a storytelling cafe to celebrate World Storytelling Day 2023. Together we can, the power of story. Tonight you will see 6 tellers, and they will highlight and talk about the collaborations that we have developed through Storytelling Alberta and Story Share. And they will each tell a story.
World Storytelling Day is a global celebration of the art of oral storytelling. It is celebrated in March, and it is a time when as many people as possible tell and listen to stories in as many languages and at as many places as possible.
And so let us begin with our first teller. We are delighted to welcome to our stage this evening, Troy Stuke. Troy is a Métis woman living in Calgary, and she is coming to a deeper understanding of how research into her Métis identity is ceremony for her. And she shares these concepts through her stories, and she loves to tell them to her own family as well. And she has been mentored through the Storytelling Alberta group, Storytelling Alberta Indigenous Tellers. Troy will begin this evening with the land acknowledgement and then share her personal story, The Hearthstone. Troy.
Thanks, Mary. The Creator has gifted us with this land that we're born on to live, play, learn, work, and die on. Tonight, we gratefully acknowledge our ability to be present on this land with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. On behalf of Storytelling Alberta, I'm also acknowledging all Indigenous peoples and lands. And I'm so grateful for the places that we can gather on and to amazingly connect with virtually to tell our stories. I'm in Mohkinstsis, which is Calgary now, and this is the ancestral territory of the Siksika Sitapi people, which includes the Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, and the Emskapi Piikani people. I acknowledge all the Treaty 7 signatories, including the Tsuut'ina people and the Iahe Nakota people, which includes the Bearspaw, Chiniki, and Wesley nations. I acknowledge this home is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta within the historic Northwest Métis homeland. And most personally, this land is where I live, and it's the home of Métis Nation within Alberta Region 3. We welcome all others who call this place home, and we honor and celebrate this territory together as we tell our stories this evening. Tanshe Kia, Troy Stuk, Tishinikashon. So as Mary mentioned, I'm a midship woman, and belonging to the Indigenous storyteller group within Storytelling Alberta has only been possible through some of the mentorship that occurred to fabulous women, Indigenous women, Cheryl and Chantal, but also along with some of the Storytelling Alberta leaders who are here tonight, actually, and Doreen and Mary. I've received just amazing encouragement to find my storytelling voice, which has not been all that easy sometimes. But right now there's already 17 Indigenous storytellers in Storytelling Alberta. So the way it started for me was after a few months of signing up with the group, I was invited to a Zoom meeting to learn some more. That was their hook. And they had a very gentle way, though, of bringing me on. No pressure. Really, the only pressure I felt were these stories inside of me that were just bursting to be told. I'm really grateful for the support I've been receiving to share some of my words. And I've been impressed actually with the actions of Storytelling Alberta to embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to support in a trauma-informed way the work that's needed to bring us as Indigenous storytellers to be able to tell our personal tales. So thank you very much. The hearthstone. The First Nations that are closest to where I live, the Iahe Nakota, have also been called the Assiniboine. And the meanings of this name includes mountain people, the stone people, or the people who cook with stones. And in fact, this is where my story this evening will take us. Think of this. It's 1980, Calgary, Alberta, Mohkinstsis, which is Blackfoot for elbow, or maybe Otisquani, which is in Cree, it means elbow. I don't yet know anything about my Métis identity, and I'm 22, ambitious. My husband and I think we're ready to buy our first house after a few years of renting and moving around. We'd only saved up enough for a tiny down payment for a house, courtesy of our parents. And we were looking all around the neighborhoods in Calgary, Northwest, Southwest, trendy downtown. And the Northeast, where the houses were what we could actually afford. The Southeast was too far away from our parents, and our kids were just twinkles in our eyes still. We tripped over an archaeological dig site in an area we couldn't afford at the time. It was in a new neighborhood in Northwest Calgary called Hawkwood, after the dairy farmers who'd sold their family's land to Melcor, the developer. There was a trailer on the edge of a hill leading down to a pond. The developer was going to make a fortune here, you could tell. Seeing the mountains so big and so close, you could almost touch them. The trailer was just another Atco trailer, you know, the white and yellow kind you see everywhere during the boom cycles and the kind that disappear during the busts. Kind of like now, I don't see too many of those. It was dark inside this trailer, but they had these cases of arrowheads, I called them, but I think the technical archaeological name is points with some number and letter combination connected to how the science carbon dates them. Melcor had to do the archaeological dig. It was a new Alberta law, just 6 years old at the time. So fast forward 30 years. I still don't know anything about my Métis identity yet, but we'd managed to buy our house in Hawkwood after all, and we were lucky enough to do some renovations. A small digger was brought in to extend our living space and dig a bit more foundation. You know, every night I went out and searched in this excavated pile of dirt and clay and stones for, I don't know what or why. I just searched. And then in the corner of my house, outside of my kitchen, at the very deepest point, was a vein of black. I pulled out charcoal. It was from a fire, of course, 8 feet below ground level. I was just thrilled. I still am thinking of it. I carefully put this charcoal in a baggie. So it wasn't a lot, but there was enough for a baggie. And later that year, I showed it to an archaeologist. I was thinking, what will they say about it? They were unimpressed. Old news. Just put it all away. Not until the end of 2022 did I think of it again even. And then searching my basement, I found this baggie along with a stone I tucked in there too from that excavation 12 years ago. And this stone is unremarkable in some ways. It's heavy, it's dark, it's gray, you know, the type you see all over the glacial moraine in this area. In fact, here it is. It's about like 3 kilograms. What must have caught my eye though, is that it's flat and oval, like a cooking stone for an ancient hearth. Muddy still from years ago, I finally got up the courage. So it was 12 years of dirt from the time I'd found it. But so I finally got up my courage to just wash the dirt off. And the Hawkwood archaeologists in their research notes called this kind of stone lustrous red quartzite. Oh, when you wet it down, it's this beautiful purpley red. And what I thought it was a patch of white quartz on top actually turns out to be white lichen covering the flat top in what I think is the shape of maybe a pregnant bighorn sheep or maybe a rabbit. But I feel like I've discovered the Indigenous equivalent to the Shroud of Turin. Like, what a responsibility. Like, what do I do now? And right at that moment, Mary Hayes, one of our hosts tonight, phones me up while I'm in the middle of thinking about all this at my kitchen table. And she says, well, can you do a story about Together We Can, the power of story? And I said, sure, it'll be about cooking, is what immediately popped in my head and out of my mouth. But I giggled later when I realized, oh, she probably thinks I'm going to share a recipe. But I kind of did mention Bannock to her after all. You know, I found myself wondering as I thought about tonight, what this idea of a hearthstone and its place where women cook and somehow take what were these massive animals and share it into bite-sized pieces all around to those who need the food. The place where many flattened stones create the space and the place where people come to cook and eat, especially for my Iahe Nakotan ancestor neighbors. They've been my guides to this ancient place that I live on, I think. When I say ancient, I'm not talking hundreds of years. It's a site where the hearths that were found were dated to over 8,000 years before our present day. Yeah, 8 millennia. This is literally the home of the people who first cooked here on stones. You know, what more can this stone and charcoal tell me about the hearths of my ancestors and my community today? Archaeologists found that this area I live in was a light butchering camp for bison and elk. What wonder to know that those majestic animals were roaming like right here. They knew it was a light butchering area from the size of the bones they found. I mean, what people could carry, right? The heavier butchering would have been done down closer to the river, likely. So to stand together and cook or tell these tales, our truths, and speak from the heart, it requires a significant slowing down on my part and taking a good look around the corners of my life that I'd rushed by for so many years and lived, passing with white privilege, not knowing that I was Métis, to unpack my own story and match them with the stories of my Métis and Cree ancestors and reflect on my day-to-day life choices. I've had some really good advice about how to travel this journey in a good way. Research is sacred work for me, and I couldn't do it without a community surrounding me. And I see storytelling as both my opportunity, but more my obligation to give back. This hearthstone made some very loud noises for me to pay attention. Perhaps my ancestors used this hearthstone to also grind grains and seeds, maybe make a paste or something to spread on the rock and cook an early version of bannock. Bannock, you must have tried it, whether it's called bannock or fry bread, biscuits, or flatbread. There's a big similarity across cultures on the ingredients. So you get your flour, liquid, fat, a leavening agent, and heat to activate the rising. It's really an art and a science, like all cooking is. I'm pretty good at doing my, still sort of settler version of baked, it's baked white flour and it's kind of biscuity. But honestly, to eat other people's bannock, oh, chef's kiss here. Like when the dough's been wrapped around a stick and cooked over a fire at Métis Crossing, or fry bread with jam at the Elbow River Camp at the Calgary Stampede. That leaves me just quite satisfied. These treasured memories I can only build together with my Métis community. And because of our ancestors' talent for survival using the gifts of the land that we all share. As well, this hearthstone reminds me that there were times of great scarcity, and this now empty stone teaches me that as well, reminding me to share what I have. So now I make many bannock attempts for together times, usually for my grandkids, sometimes for friends, because together and with the care and wisdom of my family, community, and ancestors, we cook together. And when breaking our bannock, it reminds me to make time for stories to be shared or discovered. But always remembering that 8,000 years ago, my ancestors here in this place were preparing and cooking on stones like mine, eating bison, telling stories, and after their feast, falling asleep together under the stars. Back to you, Linda.
Thank you, Troy, so much for sharing that fascinating story and Indigenous history around finding a very special stone. Thank you very much. Our next teller is Madiha Mada. Madiha is a lover of story in any form. She was named Storytelling Alberta's Emerging Storyteller in 2019. And since then has gone on to tell folk tales, family and historical stories in personal and professional settings to facilitate connection, learning, and healing. Madiha enjoys dabbling in all things creative and lives and plays alongside her partner and her 3 children in Northeast Calgary. Madiha was pleased to devote some of her time to Story Share project, telling stories and presenting workshops in English and Urdu, the national language of Pakistan. Madiha will be telling 2 short stories. The first is The Farmer and His Sons, a short folk tale about how a father teaches his sons the importance of working together. This will be told in English. And then The Braid. This is Madiha's reimagination of The Farmer and His Sons, centered around women. And this will be told in Urdu. Madiha.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you. I am so pleased to be able to participate in World Storytelling Day and to talk to you about my experiences telling stories in Urdu as part of the StoryShare program. Now, I signed on to be a storyteller for the StoryShare project, and I began with telling stories in English. And as I made these meaningful connections with isolated seniors all over Calgary and beyond, I wondered about being able to extend our outreach and being able to do story sessions in languages other than English. The StoryShare project team was very supportive of this idea, and they gave me the green light. So it wasn't long before I started telling stories in Urdu as well. Many of our Urdu and Hindi-speaking clients were referred to us through SIWA, the Calgary Immigrant Women's Association. And through doing group sessions with them and the one-on-one sessions that followed, I was able to take this connection to the next level. Because for me, Urdu had always been a language that I had really only spoken with my family. And to be able to tell stories and listen to stories in this language, well, that just deepened the connection that I felt towards these women. And as they told me their stories of migration, of different obstacles they had overcome, of adventure, and just the day-to-day moments, I felt this strong sense of connection with them, of apnapan. Apnapan means ours and us. Now, when I heard the theme of this year's World Storytelling Day, Together We Can, I was immediately reminded of a short folktale from the Gujarat region in India. And today I would like to share that with you. It goes by a few different names. I'll refer to it as The Farmer and His Sons. Once there was an old farmer, and he had 4 sons. Now the sons, well, they would squabble and quarrel and bicker and banter, and this was of great concern to the old farmer, for he did not know how much longer he had. And how could his sons run the farm together if they couldn't get along? After much reflection, one day he gathered his sons and he asked them to go find him a stick. So off they went into the fields and the forest behind their home, and they returned with a stick. The farmer instructed them to break the stick, and without any effort at all, they were each able to snap their sticks. And then the dear farmer sent them out again in search of another stick. And the sons, not knowing where this was headed, but knowing their father was a wise man, well, they obliged, and they went out again, and each returned with a stick. And this time, their father took a piece of string and tied it around the sticks, and he made a bundle of sticks. And he handed this bundle to his sons, and he said, "Now break the sticks." And their sons each tried as he might to break this bundle, but he couldn't, because it was just too strong. And so the farmer turned to his sons and he said, "Each of you is a stick. Alone, you are weak, but together, you are strong. So remember this lesson, my sons, as you move on, for it will serve you well. And that is the story of the farmer and his sons. Now, when I heard this story, my immediate reaction was, well, where are the women? And this was a question that I found myself asking again and again, because as I learned and tried to find folktales that resonated with me, that were from the subcontinent region, they were always about animals and sometimes about men, farmers, merchants, sultans, priests even. But where were the women? I thought about these women from the Siwa partnership that we had and how incredible they were, their stories and the resilience and the love that they had for their families. And I asked myself, well, why isn't this being shown? And so I thought, if this story about the farmer and his sons was about women, how would it be different? And so I reimagined it, and that is the story that I would like to share with you today. And I'm going to share it in Urdu with probably a few Hindi words mixed in. And I dedicate this to all of the incredible women who I was able to have these meaningful storytelling exchanges with during the pandemic. Oh, and I have called the story The Braid, which in Urdu, the word for braid is choti. एक छोटे से गांव में, एक छोटे से घर में एक माँ और उनकी 3 बेटियां रहती थी. अब जो सबसे बड़ी बेटी थी वो बहुत ही मेहनती थी, समझदार और जिम्मेदार भी थी, और वो चाहती थी कि वो हर काम बहुत अच्छे तरीके से करे. जो दूसरी नंबर की बेटी थी उसको बनना संवरना का बहुत ही शौक था. वो हर चीज में खूबसूरती ढूंढती थी और वो हर वक्त कुछ ना कुछ बना रही होती थी. जो तीसरे नंबर की बेटी थी वो तो खेल और कूद में लगी रहती थी, हंसी मजाक, और वो घर की एकदम रोशनी थी. जाहिर सी बात है वो सबसे छोटी थी तो सबकी लाडली भी थी. अब तीनों बहनों अलग अलग थे, उनके पसंद नापसंद, उनके मिजाज हर वक्त मिलते नहीं थे, और इस वजह से उनकी चिकपिक काफी चलती थी. अब ये बात माँ को बहुत परेशान करके रखती थी, क्योंकि कल को ये बेटियां अपने घरों की हो जाएंगी, और अगर ये लोग ऐसे लड़ते झगड़ते रहे तो फिर इनका क्या होगा. पता नहीं माँ के कितने दिन अब लिखे हुए. तो वो चाहती थी कि उनकी हयाती में बच्चियां एक दूसरे का ख्याल रखना शुरू करें. अब ये बात को लेके वो बहुत टाइम तक बैठी हुई थी, और फिर उनको एक ख्याल आया. तो अपनी तीनों बेटियों को बुलाया अपने पास और बोला, मेरी प्यारी बेटी, मुझे एक धागा ला के दो. अब जो सबसे बड़ी बेटी थी वो गई अपनी माँ की अलमारी में. उन्होंने खोली अलमारी और निकाला सिलाई का डब्बा. सिलाई के डब्बे में से एक सफेद रंग की रील निकाली और उसमें से धागा नाप के कैंची से काट के हर चीज बड़ी सफाई से वापस रखी. अब जो दूसरी नंबर की बेटी थी वो गई अपने खजाने में. अब जाहिर सी बात है उसको चीजों बनाने का इतना शौक था, उसके पास तो बहुत अलग अलग कपड़ा और धागे पड़े हुए थे. तो उसने जो उसको सबसे खूबसूरत दिखा वो चुना और वो धागे को लेके गई अपनी माँ के पास. अब जब वो तीसरी बेटी थी उसका तो ध्यान कहीं और ही था. उसको जल्दी थी कि मैं जब बाहर जाके खेलूं. तो जमीन पे पड़ा हुआ धागा उसने वही उठा के माँ को पकड़ा दिया. अब माँ ने बोला, अपने अपने धागे लो और इसको तोड़ने की कोशिश करो. अब ये तो बहुत आसान सी बात है. तो तीनों बेटियों ने जल्दी से धागे तोड़ के दे दिए. फिर माँ ने बोला, जाओ एक दूसरा धागा लेके आओ. तो बड़ी बेटी गई फिर से माँ की अलमारी में, दरवाजा खोला, सिलाई का डब्बा निकाला, ढक्कन खोला, उसमें से सफेद रंग की रील निकाली, धागा नापा, कैंची से काटा और हर चीज बड़ी तमीज से वापस रख के आई. और दूसरी नंबर की जो बेटी थी वो गई अपने खजाने में फिर से. उसको था कि अब मैं तो कुछ अलग ही ढूंढ लूं। तो उसको मिला एक धागा, बहुत खूबसूरत और प्यारा सा धागा जो चमकता था। तो वो लेके आई अपनी माँ के पास। और जो तीसरी बेटी थी, उसने यहाँ देखा, वहां देखा, नजर तो कुछ आया नहीं उसको, और जमीन पे भी देखा, वहां भी धागे खत्म थे। तो उसने देखा अपनी बड़ी बहन की तरफ, जो सबसे बड़ी बाजी थी, उनकी तरफ देखा, अपनी आंखें बड़ी बड़ी करके, और बाजी का दिल नरम पड़ गया। तो उन्होंने इशारा किया अलमारी तक। तो सबसे छोटी बेटी गई, लड़कते फरकते गई, अलमारी खोली, सिलाई का डब्बा निकाला, और हर चीज बिखरने शुरू कर दिया उसने। निकाला एक धागा और ले गई अपनी माँ के पास। बिखरी हुई चीजें यूं ही की यूं ही छोड़ दी उसने। अब माँ ने तीनों धागे लिए और एक साथ बांधे, और फिर जो 3 अलग अलग धागे थे उनको एक के ऊपर एक के ऊपर एक डालने शुरू किया उन्होंने, जब तक कि उनसे एक प्यारी सी चोटी नहीं बनी। और उन्होंने दिखाई अपनी बेटी को और बोला, देखो, तुम तीनों ये धागों की तरह अकेले नाजुक से हो, मगर जब एक साथ हो जाते हो ना, तो ज्यादा मजबूत होते हो। देखो, ये चोटी तोड़ने की कोशिश करो। और बेटियों ने कोशिश की, और इतना आसान नहीं था जितना आसान था धागा तोड़ना। तो माँ ने उनको बोला, मैं समझ सकती, तुम तीन जो हो अलग अलग हो, तुम लोगों में फर्क है, तुम्हारी पसंद, नापसंद, खुसूसियात और ख्वाहिशात। मैं ये नहीं कह रही कि एक जैसा बनना चाहिए, मगर तुम तीनों को ऐसे जुड़ा रहना चाहिए, एक दूसरों की जिंदगी, एक दूसरों की जिंदगियों में आना जाना, एक दूसरे का ख्याल रखना, क्योंकि जिंदगी में ना अच्छे वक्त भी आएंगे और बुरे वक्त भी, और इन सारे वक्तों में तुम्हें एक दूसरे का सहारा की जरूरत है। तो ये है वो किस्सा, एक माँ, उनकी 3 बेटियां और चोटी की। शुक्रिया बहुत बहुत। Thank you for listening to my story.
Thank you so much, Madiha. It was beautiful. And hearing that story in Urdu with the music of the language washing us over, and the gestures and the facial expressions and the beautiful telling to support the story, and our theme of Together We Can, it's really is a wonderful metaphor for us, the braid. Thank you, Madiha, so much. And now, let us welcome to our stage Doreen Vanderstoep. Doreen is a Calgary-based storyteller, musician, and writer. She performs stories of all kinds, from traditional tales to literary adaptations and her own original work. Doreen also intermingles music and story in her performances. And she leads workshops on storytelling to help others find their passion for storytelling. Doreen is the project manager for Story Share, which brings storytelling to seniors in the Calgary area. It has been an amazing project for us to be part of as tellers. Doreen's debut novel, Watershed, was published by Freehand Press in 2020. And it won the Book Publishers Association of Alberta Trade Fiction Book for 2021. Now, tonight, Doreen will tell us the story Davy and the Fish. She has adapted the story with permission from a telling by Taffy Thomas of the Lake District in England. Doreen.
Thank you so much, Mary, for that very kind introduction. What amazing, it's just so amazing to be part of this wonderful lineup tonight. And thank you, Troy and Madiha, for your stories to start off this beautiful evening. And thank you to Mary and Linda for organizing it all. It has been an honor for me to be the project manager for Story Share these last 3 years. We have an amazing team, our excellent administrative team and our storyteller facilitators and our volunteers have connected with over 850 seniors during this project. We have done this through over 1,800 service engagements. Now, these service engagements included one-on-one sessions with story sharing involved. We would listen to the senior story and they would listen to ours. We also have group story sharing sessions called tell-arounds. We also have recorded legacy videos with seniors, and we have 45 of those now up on our YouTube channel. We've also led workshops in oral storytelling, and we have partnered with the Alzheimer's Society of Calgary to bring the Time Slips program to people with dementia. And that's a beautiful program where we bring in a picture and we ask questions of the participants pertaining to the picture. And then with their answers, we create a story around the picture. It's really, really a lovely experience. Now, we have been able to establish many partnerships with organizations in our community, and it's been wonderful. Of course, we're particularly grateful to all the people over the 40 years of our Storytelling Alberta history who have made this organization what it is today. They have nurtured it so that we could take on a big project like StoryShare, and we stand on their shoulders. We are grateful, of course, to all the seniors who have participated in our program. We are grateful for their generous listening ears to our stories and for trusting us with theirs. We are particularly grateful to our generous funder, the Calgary Seniors Resource Society, for they recognized the benefits of creative engagement through oral storytelling for seniors, which just goes to show you, when you have a dream, support and help can come from very unexpected places. And that is what this story is about, called Davy and the Fish. Davy hated fish. He hated the smell of it. He hated the taste of it. And he hated the slimy feel of it, which was unfortunate because young Davy and his wife lived in St. John's, Newfoundland, and the only work that Davy could get was on a fishing boat with an old fisherman. Every day, Davy went out on the boat, and the skipper would dump a great big net full of fish on the deck, and it was Davy's job to cut off the heads and to pull out all the squiggy bits in the guts. Now, judging from some of the facial expressions I'm seeing in my little Zoom thumbnails, well, you wouldn't like that job any more than Davy did. But he had to do it every day. One day, he was out on the deck as usual, and there was a big net full of fish that had been dumped on the deck. And he looked down and he saw the most beautiful little fish he'd ever seen. It was a mackerel with beautiful blue stripes on it. Well, he picked up that little fish and held it in his hand, and he felt its little heartbeat between his fingers, and he could not kill it. So he tucked that fish behind his back, and when he thought the skipper wasn't looking, he slipped it overboard back into the water. But the skipper had seen, and he called out to Davy, "Davy, I don't stand on this deck 7 days a week getting soaked to the skin so you can take fish and throw them back in the ocean. You are sacked. When we get back to shore, I want you to take your feet off my boat and never come back. Your fishing days are done." Now, Davy was a little bit glad about this and a little bit sad. He was glad because, well, he wouldn't have to do that awful work anymore. But he was sad too, because now he'd have to go home and tell his wife that he didn't have a job, and that was no way to be. So because Davy was feeling a little low, he did the one thing you're never supposed to do on a fishing boat. He began to whistle. Now, it's taboo to whistle on a fishing boat because if you whistle before the mast, you either whistle up the wind or you whistle up the devil. when the skipper caught wind of Davy's whistling. He said, "Davy, if you don't stop your whistling, you're going to be off the boat right now." And since they were still 30 miles out, Davy stopped whistling. But when they did get back to shore, Davy stepped off the boat and he knew his fishing days were done. And so, dejected, his head bowed, his eyes filled with tears, he walked the road towards home. He soon realized that he wasn't alone, and when he turned, he saw a fellow leading a black and white Frisian cow by a rope. Now, this fellow was odd looking. He had 2 little horns coming out of his head. He had cloven hoofs for feet, and he had a little tail sticking out the back of his trousers. And Davy thought, he's not a local. Now, of course, you and I both know that this was Old Scratch, the devil himself. And the devil said to Davy, "Why so long in the face, Davy?" And Davy said, "Well, I just lost my job, and now I have to go home and tell my wife." And the devil said, "If you had this cow, Davy, well, then you'd be set, for this cow gives the richest, creamiest milk that ever was." "Really?" said Davy. "Well, that may be so, but that cow isn't mine, it's yours." And the devil said, "Yes, but it could be yours if we strike a bargain." He said, "Davy, I will give you this cow for 3 years. And after 3 years, I will come back and I will have 3 questions. And if I don't get answers to my 3 questions, then I will sling you over my shoulder, take you to the pits of hell to burn for all infinity." Davy thought. Now, Davy was young. He felt quite invincible. And well, 3 years, it seemed like an awfully long time. And so he agreed. And he shook hands with the devil. The devil handed over the rope with the cow, and Davy went off down the road. When he looked back over his shoulder, he saw the devil do a double backflip and disappear in a crack in the earth. And Davy thought to himself, with any luck, that's the last I'll see of him. Well, when his wife saw Davy coming up the walk with the cow, his wife was gobsmacked. She had seen Davy come home with friends before. She had seen him come home with fish before. She had even seen him come home with a bit of money, though not very often. But she'd never seen him come home with a black and white Frisian cow. Well, she ran out the front door and she said, Davy, whatever are you doing with a cow?" And Davy said, "Wife, I have left my fishing days behind for good." Of course, he didn't mention that his fishing days had left him behind. He said, "This cow gives the richest, creamiest milk that ever was." He said, "We are going to open a tea shop. We're going to make cheese and butter and pudding. We're going to make a fine living." Well, his wife was very happy, for they had always wanted to go into hospitality, but never had a chance. Well, they opened a tea shop. And even though the devil usually lies, this time he was telling the truth. For this cow gave the richest, creamiest milk that ever was. And word spread of their little tea shop as easily as the butter they made. And they did very well. 3 years to the day from when Davy got the cow. He was sweeping up in his shop at the end of the day. There was only one customer left, sitting in the corner. And with a puff of smoke and a flash of light, there was the devil once again. And the devil looked at Davy and said, "Are you ready to answer my questions?" And the fellow in the corner said, "Yes, he is. And that was your first one. You only have 2 left." The devil swung around and looked at the customer in the corner. And he looked back at Davy and he said, "Davy, will you make sure the fellow in the corner stays quiet?" Well, the fellow in the corner winked at Davy and Davy winked back. And Davy said, "No, I will not. And that was your second question. You only have 1 left." Well, by now the devil was fuming and he turned angrily towards this customer in the corner and he said, Who the hell are you anyway? Well, the fellow in the corner said, I am the king of the fishes. 3 years ago, Davy saved my life by throwing me back overboard. And I have come to return the favor by saving his life today. And I have done it. For that was your third question. You have none left. Oh, the devil. Oh, he was so furious. He took one of his cloven feet and he pounded it into the floor, leaving a mark in the concrete. He was so angry, but knowing he'd been bested, off he went, storming out. As far as I know, Davy and his wife still run that tea shop in St. John's. And if you happen to go on holidays to Newfoundland and you find yourself in a tea shop and you see a mark in the concrete floor that looks like a cloven hoof, well, then you will know exactly whose tea shop you're in.
Oh, thank you, Doreen. That was delightful. And I indeed have been at a tea shop in St. John's, Newfoundland. So I didn't know to look for the mark. And Doreen, I must say that was a whale of a tale. Thank you so much for delighting us and informing us about StoryShare.
Our next teller is Marika Schouten. Marika started as a young expatriate and continued when she returned to Canada in her teens. She took a writing break to study and establish her career in dietetics. Marika returned to her first passion, writing, when a dream containing only an image, a voice, and 2 words prompted the writing of her debut novel, The Beckoning Sky. Marika has been honored to be the StoryShare Legacy Project Administrator, in which she captures on video the lived history of Albertan seniors. Marika is a happy partner, mother, and avid gardener. Tonight, Marika will tell us about legacy recordings, and we will view a legacy video of Shirley Handay called Running Afoul in the Farmyard. And so, Marika.
Thank you, Linda. I'm honored to be here this evening speaking about the Legacy Project. It's very near and dear to my heart. And you've seen a number of stories this evening. I have the great joy of being able to capture people's stories. And I've had several people say to me, well, a legacy is something that's sort of for after I'm gone. So in fact, I call these living legacies. They really are a reflection of the lived history of people in Alberta right now. Some of my clients have expressed some trepidation about being recorded, seeing themselves on video, or hearing their voice. And I think it's one of those things that you need to step out of your personal life and take a bigger look at the larger picture. Some of my clients have said that they think their lives are rather mundane and not really worth recording. I think every life is a story worth telling and recording. So looking at the bigger picture, the framework I usually provide is something like, consider, the length of time. How, let's say something like communication. 100 years ago, telephones at home were through the party line. So in the 1920s, people shared telephone lines. Consider all the changes up until now to our current cell phones each of us has. And it's so much more than just a telephone. Then imagine you go forward into the future 100 years. For the youth of the 2120s, this will be a very unusual and fascinating time, just like the party line would be to us, right? Experiencing that is unusual and fascinating. So considering your life in that sort of bigger context and understanding that what you do right now actually is fascinating. So we have the opportunity to capture people's stories, and some of my clients have come with stories already set. Some do a little bit of work, as you've heard, Doreen and some of the other tellers do some, projects to work with people to create their stories or make them into little vignettes or story nuggets. Some clients have come with set stories. I think of Eddie Phillips, who in April 1944 was a young child on the docks of Bombay when the explosion happened. Denise Blackbar spoke of a fire in the barn in her childhood in her video called Fire. And Ann Wilson has an audio video in which she talks about a family drama around the dining table just post-war in the video called My Earliest Memory. As you can see, just from those few examples, as Doreen said, there's more than 45 videos now, legacy videos. It really reflects, the people in Alberta, the deep roots and the new roots of people who are here. So we have storytellers, and then we also have some clients who prefer to be interviewed. We have a series of interview questions, things, straightforward, like where were you born, and childhood experiences, maybe schooling, perhaps, going into careers and other parts of their life, to more philosophical questions. What would you say is your greatest achievement, and how would you describe your perfect day? Clients can also choose their own questions. It's all about whatever they want to talk about. So once the person is ready to be recorded, we meet online or in person. And through the magic of modern video editing, things can be edited out. So for example, if the dog starts barking, which I've told my dog to not bark this evening, if the dog starts barking, you can edit that out. If you have a coughing fit, or you just relate a piece of the story, you think, no, I don't actually want to share that. All of those can be edited out. So another reason to be comfortable in having your video completed. We can also edit things in, things like music, for the opening and closing credits, and photography. I think about some of the videos and watching people's nuances, their movements, the way they laugh. And I think about how maybe their grandchildren watch these videos and see, a turn of the head or a way that they speak that is a little thread through the family in terms of personality. So imagine adding a photograph to that video. Could be the teller as a small child, or perhaps their house on the Bald Prairie in the 1920s. So that added photography can really give a layer of beautiful richness to the story. So once the story is completed and editing is done, consents are acquired, of course, and all the videos are posted on YouTube, either public or private, according to what the client would prefer, and with shareable links, because of course we want these videos to be shared. We want people to share their stories. One of the other big signs to me of the value of these stories is, as we started considering the end of this project, what would happen to these videos, when we're done? And really, there was not much value. They wouldn't reflect the value if they ended up sort of lost in cyberspace, or, ended up downloaded to some dusty thumb drive someplace. So we contacted the Alberta Archives, and they agreed that that would be the best final resting place for these beautiful stories, which again really reflects how important a piece of history we're capturing in these legacy videos. The last thing I'd like to mention is about the collaborations. Together we can is the theme, and collaboration is a huge part of a lot of our project, but some of the legacy videos. And I'll mention two. One was a collaboration with Calgary School, in which some of the students interviewed our senior clients. And there really is some beautiful magic in watching a young person interview an older person that they don't know, and sort of draw out their history and understanding each other a little bit better. Our upcoming teller, Elizabeth Vanderstoep, was interviewed by a student named Stella in her video It's never too late to learn something new. So if you want to check that out on our YouTube channel, it's delightful to watch. The other collaboration was with Alberta Deaf and Hear, in which selected videos had American Sign Language and closed captioning added, again, to increase accessibility for everybody to be able to hear and experience these stories in their own ways. And an example of this is our highlighted video, Shirley Handy's Running Afoul in the Farmyard. So without any further ado, Doreen, over to you for Shirley's video.
Oh, give me a home where the buffalo roam, where the deer and the antelope play, where seldom is heard a discouraging word, and the skies are not cloudy all day.
I want to tell you about my experiences with farmyard fowl. So when I was 6, my younger brother and I went to live with an aunt and uncle, excuse me, at Ardrossan, Alberta. And one of my chores was feeding the chickens, which I thought was great fun. Carry a little bucket of grain and you chick, 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 and they all come running, and oh boy, that was fun. My next chore was collecting eggs, and that worked out okay until I had to try and get eggs from a broody hen. Well, she pecked me and I ran screaming. I'm not going to do that anymore. Nope. Anyway, unfortunately on a farm, everybody has a job. That was mine, which saw me with my winter parka and my mittens on, collecting eggs from then on. Then when I was 10, we went to live with our grandparents in Robert, Saskatchewan, because they needed help on the farm. And Grandma was 72 then, so I got to help her in the house a whole bunch and thought I was really grown up until I crossed horns with the leghorn rooster, so to speak. Every time I went to the outhouse, he was there to chase me back to the house. And he had me scared. I would run like the wind. Anyway, I finally smartened up and took the little stubby porch broom with me. And if he saw that porch broom, I never saw him. But if I ever was in a big hurry, and you know what kids are like, they wait till the last minute to go, ran to the outhouse without the broom, there he was, waiting to take me back to the house. Anyway, the last experience was with the turkey gobbler. As he matured and he figured out I liked running, so he decided to chase. And chase he did until the day I ran right into the barbed wire fence. I was so scared trying to get away from him. Well, I'm sure I created quite a stir because Grandpa came running, and that never saw that turkey gobbler anymore. But I'm telling you, that Thanksgiving we had the best turkey dinner ever. That's it for me. Okay, bye.
Oh, give me a home where the buffalo roam, where the deer and the antelope play, where seldom is heard a discouraging word, and the skies are not cloudy all day.
Thank you so much, Marika, for sharing the process of recording the legacy videos. I know it must be very interesting work, that recording process. And And one of the storytellers I worked with in Teleround, she had a legacy video recorded, and I sent her a quick email, and I'm like, you are so brave to tell your story. So Marika, thank you for making that possible. And I wish that I could talk to Shirley, because I would ask, Shirley, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Because I'm pretty sure she would know. Thank you so much. And now I would like to introduce Elizabeth Vanderstoot. Elizabeth is an elder in our storytelling community. She tells of her life in the Netherlands and also of her immigration to Calgary with her young family way back in the last century in 1968. She delights us with those stories. And Elizabeth and Neil, her partner, have been our story share poster children. They've taken part in every part of our project, from back when we were doing telephone calls to online Zoom meetings and telerounds in person at their residence. And then, of course, the videos that she has recorded. Now tonight, you're in for a real interesting story. Elizabeth will tell us a story from World War II of her own family, and it is called My Sister and I. Elizabeth.
Thank you very much, Mary, for the introduction. And so the title of my story, as Mary told us already, is My Sister and I. I grew up in Holland during the Second World War with my parents and my 5 siblings. During that time, there was a big divide between the northwestern part of the Netherlands and of Holland, where we lived. In Holland, it was completely closed off for food brought in, coal for cooking or heating. It was terrible. It was real war. People were suffering from cold and hunger, and there was just nothing that could be done about it. The Germans were in full control of that area, and the winter at that time was just brutal. So people tried to survive, but still 20,000 people died from cold and starvation. That is why that time is called in the history books the Hunger Winter, and it was a hunger winter. One morning, waking up in a very cold house, my mom took my older sister and myself aside and said, "We will not survive the winter this way. We have to do something." She said, we bought this little stove, and it burns wood, and I need that to cook the little bit of food that we can still get. And also, we need one warm room in the house. She went on, "I've heard of a city that was completely bombed out by the Germans, destroyed, abandoned. But people go there now and they find wood, lots of wood between the bricks and the wires." So I was wondering, would you like to go there together and see what you can find? I was 11 years old and my sister was 13, and we looked at each other and we said, like out of one mouth, we said, "Yeah, I can do that." We realized that to survive the winter, we had to do something together. And so it went. My opa, who lived with us at that time and was very handy, he built a box on top of the bottom part of the pram, so we would have something to put our wood on. put our wood in. And so it went. We went the first day after learning how to get to that city and started our trek. We were a little bit nervous, not knowing what was going to happen. And we had to walk an hour and a half to get to that city. But when we arrived, we did see the destruction. This was a harbor city, so it was fiercely defended by the Germans. But we also saw all the wood that was on the ground. It was just really a rich area in that way. So my sister said, you know what? Maybe we should start with putting 4 long pieces. I'm sure we can find those in each of the corners of the box. Then we will fill the box with smaller pieces. I said, yeah, and then over top, we can put longer pieces, again, supported by the 4 corner sticks. Well, we looked at each other in surprise, like that we found so quickly such a good plan. And we were sure it would work. So we went in one of the places that looked like a family had lived there. It felt really weird and kind of sad. But then we looked around and saw lots of pieces of wood that we could throw in the cart. So that's what we started to do. Walking over the rubble was very difficult, but when we started to really gather a good amount of wood, that gave us energy. After a couple of hours, we felt hungry, and my mom had made a couple of slices of the black bread that we ate at that time. But she put a spread on it. Tasted remarkably like cheese. I don't know how she did that, how she made that spread, but it sure tasted delicious after all that hard work. So we rested a bit, went back to our job. When it started to become really dusky, we decided that it was time to go home. We came home and my mom, he clapped our hands together and was so happy. Oh, she thanked us for our hard work, and she filled the stove that was standing at the hearth with the wood that we had brought in and put a flame to it. And very soon, the crackling of the wood and the warmth that started to fill the room made us look at each other with a smile and with pride. The next morning, the stove was cold and the wood was gone. So we realized that we would have to go out every day to keep our family alive. Well, the thought wasn't all that bad, because coming home with a load of wood that profited our whole family gave us enough satisfaction to go out the next day with an empty cart and full of anticipation for the job ahead. And so it went that winter. And winter it was incredibly cold. It was the coldest winter in memory. Also much more snow. We didn't have the shoes to keep our feet warm. Neither did we have boots. And our clothing was not really adequate either. In the end, we only had one pair of mitts that we shared. The other pair had been shredded by the wood that we were picking up constantly. It became harder and harder, of course, to stay warm. One day, we were so cold that we kept on stamping our feet, putting our hands in our armpits to try to keep a little bit of warmth inside. Because of that, it took us a lot longer to fill our cart. And we wanted to come home with a good load. So we looked around and it was starting to get dark. And we didn't say much, but we said just, well, let's go. We were also thinking about the curfew. At 8 o'clock, everyone had to be off the street. That got us hurrying. At the entrance to the city was a boom that we always had to had to pass when we arrived there and when we left. And then one of the two German soldiers would keep guard there. There was a guard booth on the side of the road where most of them, one of them stood to shelter from the cold and the snow. And then the other one would lift the boom and let us through. So this time we were on our way to the boom, and we were trying to hurry because we wanted to get home. But when we got to the boom, one of the German soldiers stood there, didn't lift the boom. He said, it was a really loud voice, "Halt!" It scared me so much that my heart started to pound. And the officer started to point. Didn't see that till then, but there was a pile of wood already on the side of the road. And he pointed at that. Then at our cart, then again at the pile of wood on the side of the road. Now that message was clear. He wanted us to empty our cart on that pile. I started to sob. The thought that we would go home with an empty cart and the disappointed faces of my mom and my siblings, I could not even think about it. So the officer became angry, impatient. So more forcefully, he pointed again at that wood, at our cart and at the wood. I started to cry harder. And my sister put her arm around my shoulders. And we both stood there and shook our heads like this. There was no way, that's what it meant, that we would get rid of the wood that we had worked so hard to get, and that we would need to give up now, while we needed it at home so badly. So we just stood there. Then a man came. The officer was distracted. The man came also with a cart full of wood, and the officer walked over to him and did the same thing, made the same gestures. And the man just emptied his cart and went his way. And then more people came. Of course, it was that time of day. So the officer was building, but every time I heard that loud voice, "Halt!" I felt stronger. I became more defiant. In my head, I said, no way, we're going to give this up. So we were just standing there like frozen to the ground. And the pile of wood grew and grew. Then a stir. The sound of a motorbike coming toward us. Stopped at the guard booth, and two German officers came off. After much saluting and clacking of German boots, they started to talk and look around, and then one of the arriving officers pointed at us and seemed to ask a question. The officer who had told us to empty our cart just said something and shrugged his shoulders in an impatient manner. Then the unbelievable happened. The other officer came toward us. He really looked at us. And then he made a move with his arm like, "Go." He was telling us to go. He let us go. And we went. But the feeling in my back seemed to tell me that 4 guns were pointed at us, ready to shoot. I don't remember anything of that walk home. It seemed like someone had taken over from us. To this day, I'm oblivious to that 1.5 hours of my life. But coming home, our homecoming was jubilant. My mom hugged us and said, she took a few pieces of the wood in our cart, put it in the stove, and said, we will use this sparingly. You can tomorrow stay home and rest. But after that, we went out every day to get a load of wood until May 1941, when we were liberated by the Canadians. But that's a whole other story. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Elizabeth, for that amazing, heartfelt story, family story of survival during the war. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, but not least, is our storyteller, Anne Cowling. Anne is a treasure, and she is also the treasurer for Storytelling Alberta, Storytelling Alberta Calgary chapter, and StoryShare. So as you can tell, we keep Anne very busy. Anne has been writing stories since she was 6 years old. She enjoys telling folk tales, especially Russian ones. And she tells personal stories of the adventures, pitfalls, and moments of joy in everyday life. Tonight, Anne will tell the folktale, Stone Soup. Anne tells the John J. Muth Zen version of this time-honored Eastern European folktale. Anne.
Thank you very much, Linda. And yes, as Linda says, I'm the treasurer of Storytelling Alberta. And some ways that doesn't seem like a very glamorous job. I sit in my garret with my quill pen and my lump of coal in the fireplace. But it does mean that I get involved in practically everything that goes on, because usually everything that goes on needs some money connected with it. I work with the event organizers, I help them craft budgets, I make sure things get paid properly, and that we fulfill grant requirements, the CRA requirements, the provincial requirements, everybody's requirements. I suppose it gives one perspective. It gives one maybe a bird's eye view of the operation. And so I think with this bird's eye view, maybe I can take us on a journey back to before COVID began. Do you remember those days? It was a time when we got together in person without thinking about it. And we were a happy lot. We had story cafes, maybe 2 or 3 times a year. We had a couple of workshops a year. We had monthly tell-arounds. And once a year, we would have a retreat at Sylvan Lake, which for those out of the province, it's in the middle between Calgary and Edmonton. And we would see our northern friends, the ones who could make it. So there were good times, but of course there were challenges, ones we, dealt with like you do. For instance, our northern friends, why we hardly ever saw them except at the retreat, or if they happened to come our way, or we happened to go up to Edmonton. And a skiff of snow, why that could probably kill, figuratively speaking, the audience for any of our events, because most of our events took place in the winter. And then COVID happened. Now, at first, we were really thrown for a loop. And then once we got our head around the restrictions, we thought we were done for, because how could we do anything in person? But then we started to think a bit more. We saw the possibilities. We realized that people were lonely. People had time. People wanted to learn, and people had stories to tell. So how could we help? So that first summer, it was a warm summer in Calgary, we had a couple of events in the park. We were yearning to be together. And then the winter set in. But then, like a lot of other people, we discovered virtual programming. And before you knew it, we'd had not only 3 story cafes and concerts, we had had 6 workshops in the first 6 months of 2021. And as for our northern friends, why, we saw them all the time at our practically every event. And besides coming to our events, like the good supporters they were, sometimes they were performing, they were telling, they were leading workshops. In fact, it was just so good. And as for storytellers from further away, why, my goodness, we were attending Edmonton's events and sometimes Strathcona's. And well, there was one, the international tell-around, as we called it, that was led by Bethany Ellis, and with storytellers from Europe and from the United States, as well as from all across Canada. We all became closer together. Then, well, you've heard a lot about the Story Share project tonight. Big smiles on the faces of my collaborators, because in embryo at the start of COVID, and why we started with story calls and story share by phone, and then tell-arounds virtually, and legacy stories with Marika, of course. And then, of course, once the restrictions lifted, we were going into seniors' homes in person. And then, well, our province, people outside Alberta maybe don't realize how big a province this really is and how spread out we all are. But we now had a new chapter, and we had affiliate groups, affiliates who were inspired by our various projects and our virtual programming. We had grown, and there were people, they were smiling, people were joyful. We done good. Together we could. And so now, with our bird's eye view, let us climb on the back of our eagle and sail right over the Rocky Mountains, across the Pacific Ocean, to the mountains of China, where the Great Wall of China wends its way up to the north. And there were 3 monks, Hock and Lock and Sao, who were walking along a mountain trail. They talked of many things, of cat's whiskers, of what color is the sun, and of giving. What makes one happy? Asked Hock, the youngest of the 3. Let's find out, said old Sao, who was the wisest. A bell from down in the valley drew their attention to a village far below. But what they did not know was that this village had gone through very hard times of war and famine and plague. They did not trust any strangers. They did not even trust their own neighbors. There was a farmer, a scholar, a tea merchant, a seamstress, a doctor, and a carpenter. They worked very hard, but only for themselves. They did not see their neighbors unless they absolutely had to. When the monks went down into the valley, the villagers all shut their doors and no one came out to greet them. The monks opened the gates and went into the courtyard of the village. They knocked on the door of the first house. The house went dark and quiet. They knocked on the door of the second house, and the same thing happened, and again and again. Nobody came out. This is not a happy village, they agreed. It is time for us to make stone soup, said old Sow, his face as bright as the moon. The monks bustled around the courtyard, gathering twigs and sticks. They built a huge fire, and then they filled a little tin pot full of water from the village pump and set it on the flames. A little girl was watching from a corner of the courtyard. "What are you doing?" she asked bravely. "We are gathering twigs." "We are building a fire," said Locke. "We are making stone soup," said old Sow, "and we need 3 round, smooth stones." Now, the little girl helped the monks look around the courtyard until they found 3 stones of the right size and shape. They dropped them into the pot to cook. "These are very fine stones," said Hock, "but it's a shame we don't have a larger pot. We won't be able to make very much soup then." "Oh, my mother has a much larger pot." And she ran home. The little girl ran home, started to roll the pot out of her front door. "What are you doing?" asked her mother. "There are 3 strangers in the courtyard. They're making stone soup, and they need a larger pot," said the little girl. "A soup made out of stones? Why, stones are easy to come by. I should like to know how to do that." Meanwhile, the other villagers were looking down to the courtyard below, seeing very interesting things happening. One by one, they came down to the courtyard to watch, their faces alive with curiosity. "Now, old-style stone soup should be seasoned with salt and pepper," said old Sow. "But we have none," said Hock. "I have some," said the scholar, and he hurried back to his house, and he brought back salt and pepper and a few more spices as well. Dropped them into the pot. Old Sow took a taste. The last time we had stones of this size and quality, carrots made the broth sweeter." "Oh, I have some," cried a woman, and she ran back to her house, and she came back with a huge basket of carrots, as much as she could carry, and tipped them into the pot. Said Hock. "Would an onion add to the flavour?" "But we have none," said Locke. "Oh, I have some," cried the farmer, and he ran back, and he came back with 5 huge onions and dropped them into the pot. "Now that's a fine soup," he said. Said Sow. Would mushrooms add to the flavour?" I have some," cried the villagers, and they came back with mushrooms and noodles and bok choy and pea pods. And now the magic was beginning to happen, because as each villager opened their heart to give, the next ones gave more. And each time the soup became more and more delicious. "The emperor would say that we should have dumplings," said one woman, "and bean curd, and taro root, and winter melon, and baby corn, and garlic, and ginseng." I have some," cried the villagers, and they ran back to their homes, and they put more and more things into the pot. At last, the soup was ready. The villagers got their tables and chairs and set them out in the courtyard. they brought rice and rice and what else did they bring? Rice and come on, what else? Anybody like to guess? Rice and steamed buns and lychee nuts and sweet cakes and somebody says ramen noodles. Oh, we must have a few ramen noodles. Right in there. And tea to drink and lanterns which they hung all around the courtyard. And then they all sat down and had this wonderful feast. And they were so happy because it had been the first time they had all been together for such a long time. And then, when the feast was over, they cleared things away and they brought their musical instruments, probably like the guitar that Doreen likes to play, and also puppets. And they sang songs and told stories. And they talked and celebrated far into the night. They were so happy to be together. Then, when it was time for bed, the villagers opened their doors to the monks and found them comfortable places to sleep. Then, the next morning, they gathered together by the willows in the fresh spring sunlight. "We must thank you for your hospitality," said the monks. "You have been so generous." "And we must thank you," said the villagers, "because with all that you have taught us, we will always have plenty. For you have taught us that sharing brings riches, and to think that to be happy is as simple as making stone soup," said the monks to themselves. The end.
Make me kind of hungry, Anne. And I think Storytelling Alberta ought to have a get together and invite all of you people out there in Zoom land to come to a soup making party. And we'll have that salt and pepper and all those kinds of things that Anne brought to mind, because together we can, especially if we have the braids of the stories that can come together like they did tonight. I'm really touched by our tellers tonight, Linda, and by your generous listening ears coming out. It's just been wonderful. So thank you for going all the way around the world for World Storytelling Day with the power of story. Thank you to our tellers, Troy Stuke, Medea Matta, Doreen Vanderstoop, Marika Schouten, Elizabeth Vanderstoop, and Anne Cowling. And thank you, the listeners, for your generous listening ears, and to my lovely co-host, Linda Shantz-Carestis, for joining me on this journey that we have taken together to present the concert for you. So thank you. You complete the circle. There's the teller, the tale, and the listener.
And before we depart this evening, we'd like to give a special thanks to all who made tonight's World Storytelling Day Cafe possible. Our Provincial Storytelling Alberta President, Katrina Musaic, our Storytelling Alberta, our Calgary Chapter President, Judy Patterson, Treasurer Anne Cowling, our tech wizard, Kent Duncan, Zoom host, Doreen Vanderstoop, our social media person, Cassie Welburn, and for our poster design, Betty Hirschberger.
And thank you to our funders, Storytellers of Canada, Canada Council, Alberta Foundation of the Arts, and to you for making donations as well. Now, just a little aside here, I don't know if you can hear it, but I have coyotes howling out my front door, and they're making a real racket. So I guess they love the concert too. And I think we better say good night, Linda.
And I have to say good night, Mary. Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.